Hello, welcome back to Lost and Refound. Here we are working on some more stuff to get the big Jeep running better every time we work on it. This is a carburetor. We're going to make it carburate. I'll show you how. This is the carburetor that I put on big Jeep. It is a Rochester Quadrajet, and it's electric choke, and it also has an idle up solenoid that I'd put on it that I wired into a toggle switch. That way I could fast idle anytime I wanted. That was primarily when I was using the engine driven air compressor, and anytime there was a high electrical load, because I've got a power inverter under the dash. So these things get a bad rap, I think. You know, they're definitely not as tunable as a Holly by any means. I mean, a Holly, you can change out boosters, and you can change out squirters, and you know, then of course the jet changes, the power valve changes. If it's vacuum secondary, the diaphragm and spring in it. You know, there's a ton of tuning on a Holly. I can get my way around a Holly, fair enough. I got into these because off-roading, I found they stumble less. They didn't run out of fuel as bad on steep inclines, and just found it performed a lot better. There's others that say the same thing. I think the biggest problem with them is they may not always be sealed up. So we'll get into some of that. You can kind of see right here, and this epoxy is starting to come apart. There's some epoxy on there. So anywhere there was a port drilled at a funny angle that they had to put a plug in and kind of crimp around the plug to seal, that was a potential problem for leaks, even to the point that on the secondary metering rod wells, on the rebuild kits, there's a little gasket that you put underneath to hopefully soak up and seal up any fuel that would dribble out of those. So that's a little rundown on what we got going. This, I don't know if you saw this, I've extended the vent up. It's just a little piece of vinyl hose that I kind of cut and molded so that if it were on a really bad angle and the fuel bowl wanted to spill over, it wouldn't just flop down into our primaries and make it flood and glug. So I guess we can keep talking about the way this thing works. If you'll notice on the bottom side, it's got two small primaries and two very large secondaries. So when you're running around under part throttle or cruise, in theory you should be running on just your primaries and hopefully getting a little bit better fuel economy. That was the original design intention. One of the benefits, I think, to the smaller primary throttle body or throttle bores is a lot quicker acceleration, because out of velocity of the air rushing through the venturi, it tends to have a little snappier throttle response, I think, right off a idle or just off a cruise. And then of course it's got a pretty decent sized accelerator pump that squirts fuel down in there as well. So this is what I also call a hybrid on the secondaries. The lower throttle plates are connected mechanically. So when you mash her down, give her throttle, it'll open. Hopefully it doesn't squirt fuel out. Let's see. So see, our primaries are open. But when you mash her down, those secondaries open. Now, that's all well and good, but these upper air doors will not open unless there's enough vacuum draw to open them. So what happens is you mash that throttle down, you give it, a squirt of fuel with your accelerator pump, and the primaries are wide open, the secondaries are now wide open. Well, now you've got to have enough airflow volume for it to want to flow through. You've created a vacuum underneath in the intake manifold. It's wanting to draw more air in. You now have a high pressure area up here, and that's what opens these air doors, is under vacuum. You'll also notice this little lever here. When those air doors open, that lifts up. On the other end of that is a set of metering rods that they go down into the secondary metering wells. Well, when you give her the beans, it pulls that rod out. Now that rod, it's tapered, so it, in a way it meters into an orifice size the amount of fuel going into the secondary circuit. So you've got it pushed to the floor, the secondaries are open on the bottom. Now this kicks open, that opens, it lets fuel go in. You got more air, you got more fuel, and it's just really pouring some gas down its throat. It's also got, I don't know if you can see, a little cam in there. That's your opening rate of how fast it will open those metering rods up in the wells. So, and then we've got a vacuum pod on this side, and this actually will help keep it closed under part throttle and idle conditions. So this is on a ported vacuum port. Vacuum comes up in here. Boop. So this port, when you're under idle or part throttle, it's got some vacuum. It's pulling this pod and sucking on that lever, and it's holding it down. So when you've changed the vacuum within the carburetor, within the intake, it loses vacuum on this port, and that's how another way it overcomes those air doors, because otherwise you can see how they just flop open. Oh, let's see, what other cool stuff about a Quadrajet is there? They've got cute nicknames. They've got the Quadrabog, the Quadrajunk. Not as cool as toilet bowl injection, which may look at later, but said I think they're really a misunderstood carburetor. There again, nowhere near the tunability of a Holley, but you can change the primary jets. You can adjust your float levels. You can adjust your secondary metering rod, opening rate with the cam, the amount of lift with this arm, the basically metering the secondary fuel side. You can change the metering rods for more fuel, less fuel when it's under wide open throttle. If I remember right, this came off of a late 80s Chevrolet big block, and I want to say it was rated at like 680 CFM. 360, smaller displacement, but I got a lot more cam than a factory 454 had. So it's worked really well for me. Said, Hollies are good. I've, built a few, set up a few, especially on, flat ground racing cars, but off-road, this is kind of my preferential choice for a carburetor. Unfortunately, as we get, further along in the years, less and less aftermarket support. Fuel injection is the way, and I'm not afraid of fuel injection. Like I said, I'm considering it later on. So enough of me rambling on about the Q-Jet. Let's start breaking it down and cleaning her up. And we know it's got a sticky needle and seat on our startup and drive. We had to blow some air through it. A little bit dirty. These later model ones, they use a Torx bit, and they use different sizes for different locations. Most of these are about the same length. There's 3 on the front, 1 on the side here. I believe are all the same, if my memory serves me. So far so good. I want to say these were a little shorter, but they may be the same length. Yeah, those are the same length. Now, alright. These, however, are longer. Remember that much. I do believe. Quite a bit longer on these back two. Look at the big guy. So when I'm doing these, first pull out your air filter stud. I like to pull this first, and then we pull our rods and metering or arm. That way they don't get bent up. Got a couple more in the back of the choke air horn. And we're not going to do a deep soak on any of this. We're just going to do a quick clean and refresh. Alright, so one size down. I'll have Hillary show you something. My camera person's dog sitting. So, kind of show you. Alright, if you can see that, down inside there, there's 2 little tapered screws. Don't forget to pull those, or else you'll never get the top off and you'll be like, what the heck's going on? Alright, one more. And we'll pull our screw off for choke lever. And this choke lever just has a double D to locate it on the choke plate. Typically the way I remember to put that on is the bump out with the letters out, or the numbers out, and that'll get you in the right position. So much more. I think I want to pull that vacuum pod just to make it a little easier. That off to the side. So that, alright. Now, if I did remember everything, I like to try and tap these loose instead of just prying on them. Less of a chance of breaking a flange or whatnot. But sometimes I think our gasket's just stuck to it. Oh, I missed one. I forgot about the one right there. It's another reason you don't want to just go gung-ho prying. If you do miss one, could be bad. Alright, so ripped our gasket, which I was hoping not to do, but I'm not surprised. You have to wiggle our accelerator pump rod out of the lever, flip that over. We'll talk about air bleeds and stuff like that. Watch out now. Yeah, our accelerator pump, she's a little bit crispy. That's why off idle it just would bleh. Yeah. Ethanol over the years just absolutely destroyed it. Alright, so from here we're going to get a brand new razor blade, sharp razor blade, clean all that off, and dump that fuel out too. So now we're into the guts of her. I can show you. Fuel comes in here. Factory has a filter in there. I do not run that filter because it's prone to clogging. Rather have an external filter than have to unscrew this and deal with that. So we have our primary metering rods, and they are springed and also work under a vacuum principle. So this little float anti-slosh for the bowl. So this typically we can just give a little tap and pop out, and these have a little spring that holds them in place. See our thin little metering rods? She puts a little bit of fuel in her. And then our spring. And like I said, parts aren't really available like they used to be. You can change like the spring for your primaries, your metering rods, both primary and secondary. I honestly don't know. It's been a while since I worked on a Q-Jet. I actually gave away all my Quadrajet stuff to a guy because I got out of building them. So they are adjustable, just not to the tune of a Holly. So this is another filler, and we'll leave that for a moment, for anti-slosh. So let's see if we can wiggle this up. Here's our float, and on the end of that you'll see our needle, and she's seen better days. It's probably hard as a rock and swollen. Our seat is there. I will get a screwdriver to remove it. But while we're looking in here, yeah, I don't know if that happened when I pulled it. See a little blue down in there? I don't know if you can see a little bit of blue in the metering port.
I don't think I can see it. I can't really see that.
Let me dry that up a little and see if we can make that better for you. So, a little goober right there in our primary jet. So, and that blue piece in there is a piece of this that got pushed in there. Said, don't believe it's when I took it apart, because it's down in there. So I'm going to have to get a pick, pull that out before I pull the jets to clean the orifices and all that. So, that being said, I'm going to get back to it. Alright, I don't know if you guys saw earlier too. There's some screws that hold the base plate to the bowl assembly. This is a 3-piece design. there again, more pieces you have with more gaskets, the greater chance of leaking. So it's not undeserving of some of their problems, but all right. Here's our base. And you can see right here, heavily soaked in fuel, that little well gasket I was talking about. It is also wet, which means that my epoxy is no longer viable. Looks like epoxy off of those is gone. So, alright. Well, we'll just have to get it all cleaned up really nice and re-epoxy all our leak points or potential leak points. Yeah, this one, I mean, just peeled it right off. But, I'm trying to think how long ago I built this thing.
Well, to carry the man.
Long time ago. More than 15 years, let's just put it that way. So, for the fact that this is the first time it's been rebuilt in 15 years, not too shabby. This gasket typically is a little easier to pop off, doesn't want to stick nearly as bad. Usually I'll put some petroleum jelly or grease or chapstick, whatever I got available, on the gaskets to keep them from sticking out, like when they stick to the body and then you got to scrape them off with a razor blade. You know, run the risk of scratching your surface and not being true anymore. So, anyway. Yep. Just what I was anticipating getting into, our accelerator pump and needle and seat. It's the only real bad things about it. So, okay. All right, one wardrobe change and a sweet tea break later, and I'm going to get back to work. I'll throw some of this off to the side, some of it away. I'll need to eyeball my kit. I'm buying a carburetor kit nowadays off the carburetor number. It's hard to get a good parts person anymore. I know, I once was one. Alright. Carbonation kit. Let's start with our accelerator pumpy. Alright. Slightly different, but actually not mad about it. Bad part is the whole thing wants to come down and need to get the spring out from under this clip. So you have to go get a pair of needle nose pliers. I think that's what we'll do. So your hard parts really don't go bad per se. Come on, get in there. Go do it. There we go. Come on, get off of there. All right. Oh, I had you. Son of a biscuit eater.
This isn't gonna
It could
fling off and hit me in the face.
It could fling off. It could. This one, nice and smooth. This one, not so much. And of course, we're missing our rubber. And our spring. Where'd our spring go? I'm going to have to look for that a little harder, I think, just to be on the safe side. That's kind of weird. Unless it just rotted away or didn't. Yeah, okay. That design didn't have one. This one did not have a spring. That's okay. So, lots of springing on the old accelerator pump. Putting them together is a little easier. So, that's seated. I like that. One accelerator pump, nice and stiff. Really got to mash her down. And then we've got a return spring underneath. That's what pushes back on the whole thing. So when you smash the throttle, that lever pushes down. It has to push down that much spring before it'll push the rest of the piston down. Don't know why. It's the way the engineers wanted it. So be it. Alright, where are we at now? Disassembling. I was going to go get that other tool. Well, I guess. Take another sweet tea break and I'll go get another tool. Found a pry bar that fits in there good. We use it as a screwdriver. It wasn't in terrible tight. I just don't want to burr up the edge of this seat. Because the way this thing works is once the needle is lifted from the float levering down from no fuel in it, fuel actually comes up and it goes around the seat and dribbles out over this. There again, another reason they don't flood out as bad because of the design. So I didn't want to booger that up. And looks like we're going to be alright. So this epoxy that I use, it's a cold weld by Permatex. It's basically the same type of stuff as JB Weld. Sets up and can be handled in 15 minutes, fully cured in like 8 to 16 hours. So what I did back in the day when I do these, working professionally, yes, this was a thing back before fuel injection. You brought your car in and rebuilt the carburetor. This isn't just a specialty thing. So anyway, I would take and break it all down, get it cleaned up, put it in the soak, and get it pulled out, blown out, cleaned off, epoxy, and let it sit, go take a break. And by the time I got done, taking a little break, come back and it was all set up enough to handle, put it together, let it sit for another 30 to 16 minutes, put fuel in it and fire it up and send the customer on their way happy. So good stuff. All right, where was I before I got sidetracked? Oh yes, there's boogers in there. I don't know if you can get down close enough to see now. The little blue boogers.
I can't see in the viewfinder. So I don't know if the camera can see it or not.
Focus. Nope, not on that. Not on that. Anyway. It won't focus on what I wanted to focus on. But there is a little blue speck in the screen that you guys saw up close and personal. That's a piece of that accelerator pump. We get a pick. We'll get that picked out. Oh yeah, that was jammed down in there. Get that picked out before I pull that jet to clean. There's two big, pretty good size. Come on, get away from each other. Anyway, it is two pieces, trust me.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Well, I pulled it out in two pieces and stuck them together. Oh, there's the other piece. It fell. So, hopefully there's nothing below this jet, booger-wise. Not that I can see. There's a little bit of fuel down in that well. So, I think that's the only two issues we had.
So is that why it was having trouble starting and then didn't like to stay started?
So the reason it was having trouble starting and didn't want to run was due to this, the needle and seat. So what happens is, I get one more piece in the mix. This little hinge point right here. So this float hinges off of this. So what happens is when the fuel bowl goes empty, it hinges down and it lifts that needle up, which opens that hole up. So what had happened was, I thought one of two things. This had a hole in it and had sunk, but that would have been flooding. So I'm like, no, it can't be that. It has to be that the needle and seat is stuck. So what had happened was, it had gotten full of fuel one time and pushed it down in there, and the fuel was so rotten that this little needle was stuck. And I tried back flowing some fuel in to get this to lubricate it, and then it'd run out, and on the hopes it'd just finally pry that up. Well, this was just so stuck that it didn't want to come up. So that's when I hit it with air on this port, and it came up through, and it bink, popped that loose. The float was free to move, and that's how it would run. Poorly, but it would run. So that's what we were getting into. So, all right. I'm going to do a bunch of cleaning. I think that's about all the explaining for right now on our breakdown. So, Hillary's giving me a funny look like, the heck's he doing?
I just thought you were.
This is vacuum operated. So, quick way to check if it works, just put, piece hose to it, suck on it, put your tongue over the hose once you're done, and see if it holds vacuum. That looks. Yeah, it holds vacuum. Another little thing I was going to show you guys real quick. See these little lines right here. It's a little raised area that goes up into the gasket to help it seal better. That's how much they had to think about sealing on these things. It's on the bottom one as well. So yeah, they leaked. I'll give them that, but otherwise I like them. All right. It is time to mix up some 2-part epoxy and reseal these parts underneath, and then we can start the reassembly process.
You're just putting it on the counter?
Yeah, it'll be all right. if my epoxy is still any good. Equal parts-ish. Clean those up in a bit. These are big old, super chunky. Hey, I don't want that in there. Alright. Try and mix this and try not to whip a whole bunch of air in it. Those air pockets cause problems. Way too much. That's okay. Don't want way too much on there though. It's in your gasket won't seat. This one, you gotta frost it pretty much to size. I got a thing about who taught me this. Honestly, I forget his name. I'm friends with his son. I went to high school with him. Nick, if you're watching, your dad showed me this. And I, for the life of me, have forgotten his name, and I'm super sorry about that. Because I know he's no longer with us. But, cool guy. He showed me quite a few things. So it was right around high school, or just getting out of high school. It was pre-Jeep times. I'll tell you that much. That kind of self-liquefy a little back on there. One down in here. Now, before I do that one, see that little plug in there? So that's what I'm talking about. So they drilled from underneath, going this way. Now you've got a 90 here. So they drilled that way, so the two would intersect. Well, this other hole in the bowl, it needs, fuel fed to it, but this other port, it needs to go wherever this round thing is cast in. So they had to plug that. So that's what these are. These are little well plugs, is the technical term. I've heard them called Welsh plugs, but I think it's well plugs. Anyway, they are known to possibly leak. I have not had this particular one leak that I've known of. But a little preventative maintenance. And you guys know how I'm with preventative maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
Alright. Oh, almost forgot the outside one. There again, see where our fuel inlet is. It's got a 90, and then it also 90 is going down. But to drill the hole going that way, they had to do a little plug. So we're going to make sure we give this every chance we can to not leak. And notice this is not sticking too awful well on this one. That's it. Don't make a mess of it. Don't want that in places it doesn't belong, that's for sure. And this one, if it happens to leak and this cap of goo falls off, we can get to it without pulling the carburetor off the engine even, let alone disassembling it. sure that is not encroaching down there. All right, it's not. All right, okay, time to start putting her together. You know, when you buy a carburetor, it's got that little, warning there, and then in case you missed that one. So, because nobody seems to know how to look these up anymore, unfortunately, I had to do a bunch of cross-referencing. So, we're going to find out. That gasket's correct. Needling seat's right. Alright, tail off it. Ooh, got some accelerator pump seals. We'll have to change that out. Oh, look, it came with a new accelerator pump rubber. Ours wouldn't have worked. So we've got a different style pump. The spring style won't work on that one. But I do have a spare one now, so that's awesome. Air horn gasket. And they include gaskets for different particular carburetors. So a lot of times you have to hold them up. So the big difference is that on this particular one. I believe, you can tell, well, they don't make these anymore. Didn't punch through the gasket all the way. Make sure all our holes are punched. And if I put it on the correct way, it should line up. So we line up back there. All of our holes line up here. Here's our through bolt holes. Here's our accelerator pump hole. This is where our primary metering rods will go through. Ooh, they even give us a new one of these. It might even. There's a scale in case you need to measure stuff. Oh, I just dropped it. Accelerator. Ugh. Pump rod. Pin. This carb base gasket may or may not work on my setup. We'll find out. It's got a whole bunch of bloaters on it, which I don't like. The other one's probably reusable. So it covers all the ports it needs to. It doesn't cover those screw holes, which isn't the end of the world. But if it doesn't work, I'm sure the one that's on there will be reasonable enough to work. New gasket for our choke cap, which we don't need. It's more of a refresh than a rebuild, I would say. So that'll be up top. Don't mind me, I'm talking to myself and just getting a game plan going. So I think I'll let that tack up just a tiny bit more. While that's tacking up, we'll talk to you about, don't go too far. I'll show you little stuff. So on this base plate, you can see that it's all chunked out and broke out. Right there and right there. So this was originally an emissions control carburetor, which means when they built it from the factory, they set the idle mixture screws and then plugged them with these similar little well plugs and made it so you could not adjust the idle mixture. Now, the problem with that is if it's set for sea level and you live at 9,000–10,000 feet elevation, it's going to be just slobbering drunk with fuel. It's going to be just too much fuel and it's going to run really rich, especially at idle. And you can't adjust that. So what guys would do is drill those out, break it away, as you can see here, to where they could get to it. Well, GM went even one step further and put, it's called a double D on it. I don't know if you can see the shape of it. It's kind of like if you had two D's butted up to each other with the flat sides together. It's kind of oval with flat sides. So they made it even a special screw head that nobody had at the time. Well, of course, the aftermarket, came out with them, and they're available still. I went ahead when I built this carburetor. Somebody had already been into it and broke that out. Not as clean as I would have done it, but it didn't hurt anything. So I put in the older style hex head idle mixture screws, and I did that one. They fit. It's a lot easier to get an adjustment tool on them to begin with, and then this is roughly a 3/16 socket size. So if I was out on the trail and something come up, I don't know if I still have it out here if I put it away. Oh, there it is. So just a 3/16 deep 1/4-inch drive socket will fit on there. Little loose, but if I was out on a trail doing a long distance trip, whatever, I could adjust that and not have to worry about having my specialty tools. I've got about 3 or 4 different kinds of these laying around. So that's that. Now I'm going to put these back in, and while we're waiting on that to dry, can twist it there. It was made on this handy little flexible cable setup, so that when you go to adjust it on a vehicle, whole bunch of stuff right here in the way, you could just feed that in and do one of these. So put that in, get it nice and snug. I'll put that back on and show you guys. So I've got a little mark here, and the reason I did that is I double checked, and these were out 1.5 turns for mixture. So that's what we're going to start with. Do 1 full turn. Since it's a square, we pretty much just go right there. And we'll do that for both sides. Now I am going to tune this after I put it on. We'll probably show that on our video. I'll set our idle, adjust our idle mixture, and then reset the timing, because when I originally set this up, it was at about 5,500 feet elevation. Now we're down here at less than 1,000, probably about 700-800. I don't know how well this carburetor is going to like all this oxygen, and if it's going to be slobbering drunk or not with fuel. In this particular screw, its bottom's out on a corner, so we'll just go 1 and half. That's a good starting point. Anyway, I will look at tuning it. So we'll do that on our video, since this is already running longer than I probably wanted, and we'll put this on, make sure it cranks back up, and do our fine tuning another day. So are we close? We're getting there. It's tacked up, but it's definitely not there yet. May have to find some new vacuum plugs. Those have seen better days. And this particular one, surprisingly, did not include that little well gasket I was talking about, where that is to that. So it's a good thing I did double seal them. And we can make this work though. Find my alignment pin on the bottom. There we go. Alright, base is seated. Now, ooh, that cleaner did a real number on them. Took everything off. Let's give them a little shot of lubrication protectant, just to keep them from ever wanting to rust up. Carb cleaner was pretty aggressive. I was surprised with that cheap a carb cleaner. Store brand from the farm store. And we'll snug these down. And just like anything aluminum, we'll try and do some sort of semblance of a crisscross pattern. Go from there, go farthest over. About 12 3/4 foot-pounds is where that one knuckle right there pops, so we're good. Alright, so I like using a little block of wood to get it up so it's not on the linkage. Alright, now it's time to reassemble some more. We're going to take this off for now. When this gets put back together, what will happen is this has to, of course, go in a certain order. This will go down. These have to be fed down through this. You can see the little cuts. It's kind of a pain to do, but it's not the end of the world. Alright, we need to put some jets in. Yeah, dry. I forget what jet number I put in these. I should probably look before I put the other one in. Can you see what size that is? What number does it say?
It won't focus.
Can you see it?
Looks like there's a 3.
No, and I don't think it'd be a 3. It'd be a 63 or 73, so I don't think it was that small or that big.
It's worn off. You can't. It's hard to see. It looks like one side says 77, the other side says 73.
I'll have to pull the other one out, see if it looks any better. So I would like to know, just in case I need to lean her up a little. Well, it's only going to have numbers on one side. The other side's kind of a funky design.
73.
Is it a 73?
Yeah.
Holy cow. She's fat. I use the handy dandy magnify and yeah, 73. Yep. Okay then. She might be running a little rich. We'll get it all set up and running, set the timing, all that good stuff. Make sure it's happy. And then at that point, I'll probably put in a new set of plugs so I can read if it's happy on timing, and then also read if it's happy on fuel. I have to have a feeling that's going to be a lot of fuel for this elevation. Okay. Next, one of our main reasons we were into this thing, needle and seat. Where's our little clip? Seriously? They don't include the clip? Oh, them cheap such and so's and such. Huh. Yeah, they didn't include the well plug either. Good thing I didn't throw that away. I'm going to need that little clip off of you in a little while, but not right now. Alright. Ooh. This one's even got the high flow seat. So. I'll hang on to that other seat because the brass seat itself isn't harmed. It's the plastic rubber tip on the needle that gets stuck and damaged. Alright. Can I place that on those? Actually feels pretty good. Oh, wait. There's... You seen it?
Oh, yeah.
Alright.
I that one into this.
Yeah, I think we'll go for it.
Hold something.
Sure, if you want to hold that. This is the point in the rebuild where I either should have left it alone or it's going to seal when I put it back together. There is no in between. Right. Alright, you got lucky on that deal. Even a broke clock is right 2 times a day. Alright, I'll give this a little lube as well. Don't want it to go in dry. First, that's got to go in. Okay, I like it. Alright. We need to check our float. And the way we check our float on these is this dangling precariously off the back of it. And you'll drop it half a dozen times at least. So it just kind of dangles there. And then goes down into the seat. And then make sure that we put it in the right way. Did not, but I can pull it out and check it. Alright. Typically you want your float kind of level with it pushed down. Mine's a little downhill. I think I built it that way for off-roading. I think I am going to bring it up just a tiny bit though. And you see this little bend in it. That's the way it adjusts. And just ever so gently straighten it out a little bit. We'll still go a little downhill, but not as much as it was before. Out here we've got the benefit of a little more. It's still a little downhill, which I like. Perfect. So that shouldn't flood out on me, hopefully. Alright, let's hook our choke lever back up. So it's kind of a pain to fish down through. Alright, what do we got left over here? We got parts. We need this spring. We need this cup. This cup does have a notch. It does sit in one way, if I remember right. Here. Oh, there's our notch. There it is. Ta-da. Alright. So I'll go in that way. Lots of screws left. The lid, this. So now we've got to line up three things at once. Both these metering rods have to go into the jets, and this has to go into the plunger slot. Once it's in the plunger slot, then we can kind of stake it into place a little bit. I'm gonna Today's fuel is so just not as good as it used to be. That's why I use a little pre-lube. And that's down in where it needs to be. That's why you saw me when I took it apart. I just was popping it to get it to come out. If you pry it out, you run the risk of damaging all that. And then you got a part that nobody has available anymore to try and replace. And oh yeah, nobody wants that. Okay, so just thinking through steps in my head. Forgot to lube my base plate gasket. That wasn't very smart of me. That one's not as critical as this one though. Alright. So just gonna use a little plain old dielectric grease just to put a film on the gasket. It'll help it seal. It won't stick quite as bad. Just got to make sure you don't get any in your little tiny holes. You don't want to block off a hole with grease. So I've used. It was Nick's dad that showed me to use the chapstick too. That was a lot cleaner. So you could just whoosh, whoosh, with the chapstick. This is more like dipping your finger in Carmex. Hey, there's two kinds of people. Those that like, dipping their fingers in that Carmex, and those that like the chapstick. Alright, got that. Good and oobed. So now, here's where that little slit I was talking about coming into play. You gotta flip that open and then feed that under the little arm on your primary rods, and then slip it in there. We got our choke linkage to come up through. Alignment pins in the back to kind of hold her all into place. Alright. There's two ways to do the accelerator pump. You can push that little pin back, get the arm off, put it together. Or you can leave it attached. See, I almost forgot to put this underneath. And that want to go ka-twanging out of the way. Or you could take your accelerator pump rod and you put it on the front hole. Don't put it on the back hole unless you got a really big thirsty girl. So then twist that on, twist that over, push that down, stick that back. Don't fall. Okay, fall. Line up all your air bleeds. Line up your accelerator pump itself, and I'm going to be able to do this today. Or are we going to have to be that way? Yeah, I don't think that's going to go without twisting an air bleed. So the key with that is don't knock that back in so far that it's butted up against the air horn. I'm going to go get a small punch to push that back. Be right back. You guys take a little sweet tea break. Alright, we had an audio failure, so I'm going to just talk about what I'm doing here. Popping the accelerator pump arm off, talking about how you don't want to push that pin too far back in. And then I went ahead and pushed it too far back in because, you know, that's just the way things are. So, got my punch. Getting that set back up. Alright. So now we'll feed our choke actuator rod through the top housing of the carburetor. Get that all hooked up, and then everything will be great. Come on, just get in the right position. There we go. We got the little arm to bolt onto the side of the... Oh wait, I jumped back to screw, hold the top down, that way I don't have to hold the spring-loaded accelerator pump. Get that fish back in, use our punch as a alignment tool. Squeeze with a couple of screwdrivers. Clean off some mounting screws. Those are the tapered ones that center the lid to the center section of the carburetor because they're the tapered seat. Talking about how you don't want to drop those down the carburetor if you're doing this on the engine. Finish getting that lid on a little more. Not torquing them down, just holding it down. Talking about how the mounting bolt goes
clear through on the front, squeezes the whole thing. Did a really good job with cleaning. Had a little surface rust, so give them a little bit of anti-corrosion on them. Drop everything in place. Screw down in a circular pattern. And we're going to wait for the exciting part. There's the dog. We just about got it all put back together. There's a dog. Wants to go for a ride. Then come to the realization of, yeah, I forgot to put that piece in. So, off comes the top part. Pop our metering rods back out. Put our primary metering rods back in that we already put in one time, but now we got the float spacer in. Round 2. There we go, talking about that circular pattern again, tightening everything down. Don't want to just crank on it and warp it. Some sort of aluminum type material. Drop our secondary metering rods down in. Got to get them in just right. Dropped into the hole. Now we can put our arm on our cam actuator for the upper air doors on that Quadrajet. And we're going to fight the choke because, you know, it went together perfectly the last time. And it's fighting me. So, we'll take the choke part and get that to where it works properly. We'll end up popping the electric choke cover off and getting everything lined back up. Tighten in that last screw on that electric choke cap. Electric choke's the way to go on a carburetor for street driven. This one works pretty good too. We got our electric fast idle solenoid. I've got on a switch, fast idle it and wait for winching, or when I add the onboard air compressor. Just runs a little better. We got our secondary air door pull off. Got to get it hooked in on the arm. Got to get the other arm that interfaces with the choke linkage. That way your secondaries won't open when it's in choke mode. Way you don't flood it super bad. That all bolted up, plugged in that port. And the final piece, the air cleaner stud, ta-da, done. So, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll show you a little bit more on the next one.